Okay, hi. So now we're mixing our tertiary of blue violet. Here we can see a previous chip I've mixed up, which is a pretty good approximation of that blue violet hue, that tertiary, that sits between our secondary of violet and our primary of blue. Okay, so you want that hue, right, to not be too violet or too blue, right? Kind of an even mix. And really importantly, you want the value, right? Your violet is your darkest of all hues, right? So your blue violet needs to be a little bit lighter than that. But then it also needs to be a little bit darker than your blue hue. But you don't have much of a range to work with here because these are all fairly dark. So that's where things get a little bit tricky. Okay, so what do we use to make this? The same grouping of our paint colors that we did for both red violet and violet are going to be used for our blue violet. We're just going to use a different proportion, right? So we're still going to use our purpley blue that we have, which is ultramarine blue. We're going to use our more purpley red that we have out of our two reds. So that's primary magenta. And then we'll also be putting in a little bit of titanium white. But this time, obviously, we're going to use mostly more ultramarine blue than magenta. So we'll probably do 2 to 2.5 parts of our ultramarine blue. And then a smaller amount, maybe 1 part. Right, maybe a little less than 1 part here of our smaller blob. Of primary magenta. That should do it, I think. And then, maybe even about half of that blob size. So if our primary magenta is that size, maybe half of that for our white. Right? Maybe a little more. At the most, right? That's sort of stretched out there, but I think here, if we push that back in, that's about half, right, of that. All right, so let's quickly, this is all on that back side of a legitimate palette sheet, so it's not resistant, right? It was soaking in. So we want to kind of work quickly. Get all this mixed. I hope this might be a little too much white, but we shall see. Make sure that we have enough primary magenta in here. I suspect that we probably have a little too much white. If I look at this, right, because this actually we probably want to go a little bit darker than this. So we need a little bit more. We didn't quite use enough magenta, and we used a little too much white. So I'm going to put back in some ultramarine blue as well, okay, so that we can counteract. Probably use all of that red in there and most of the blue, maybe. This is not a good surface to work on at all. So let's go back in with that more of that blue, so we are getting too red there. I think we may need to go back. I think we may need to add a little white again. So this is a little bit of a back and forth. So these violet, this cool part of the palette, or part of the color wheel, the hues, they end up being a little bit tricky. This is a little too, again, it's too red right now, so we got to sneak back in a little bit more of the ultramarine, and we darkened it a little too much, so sneak back in, not that much white. that a little bit. So I'm going to use probably all of that ultramarine and put that back in and hope for the best. Hope that's enough. And then I think that might be pretty good. I suspect we could go a little bit. I'm going to sneak in a little bit of white at a time just because I don't want to go too light there. The white will kind of bring out the blue a little bit more, right? So this will cool it off a little bit. And I think that's fine. I don't want to go any more white than this, I'm pretty sure. I may want to go, no, I think I'm going to be okay with the amount of blueness to this too. I don't think I want to go whiter. Let's just test generally. Oh, good. We're in a good ballpark. Let's see. I have to remember this is going to dry down a little darker. So we have to be very careful about our white amount. And again, a little bit of a difference in how much we have in there is going to really impact things because we have very little room for changes in value here between our violet, our blue violet, and our blue. Okay, let's see how this goes. This is going to appear somewhat different, right, as it dries. I think we might be okay here. I'm going to put my blue over here. Hopefully, oh, here you can still see this. And I want to make sure that our violet is still the darkest. And that might be a little bit tricky to assess since it is wet. I think it's going to be okay. We may, I'm just thinking, we may need to sneak back in a tiny bit more white. Yeah, I'm going to try that and just see. All right, so just a little bit. Oh, this flipped over on me here. That's okay. I'm going to sneak a little bit more white in here through this whole thing. And I think then that will be better. Because again, we just really need to be careful because blue violet is lighter than violet, but darker than blue. And that must be controlled by you in your mixture, okay? So you have to really, that is a critical thing in all of our mixtures, and you gotta really nail that. Okay. Let's see. All right, so that might be a little bit better. We have to wait. That's going to dry down. You know, it should be a little bit lighter. I mean, it is because we added a little bit more white, and I think that should be enough once this dries down to yield a good result. All right, thank you.